Hello, BookTube. Well, after a long interruption, I'm continuing with my 2023 library tour of all the physical paper and print books that I have in my collection. Like these things as documents. I've done it a few times before on the lifetime of this channel. And we're just working our way through. We're just going to go gradually through until we're done. Fortunately, self-indulgent as it maybe sometimes feels to me, it seems to be popular with you. So that's the justification that I need. So this first one that we'll have is a nice squat, hand comfortable UK trade paperback of Alan Taylor's The Assassin's Cloak. This is a big fat anthology of diary entries, but it's not the usual kind. It instead takes a date and takes you through entries, 1826, 1885, 1902, 1904, 1970, 1989, with famous writers, because famous writers tend to be the ones whose diaries are known, but also some that aren't famous, and that, I think, is really neat. I've read a lot of anthologies of diaries and journal entries and that sort of thing, and they're usually thematic or broken down by famous author. Whereas this really, there's nothing more beguiling than finding a copy of The Assassin's Cloak, putting it on your nightstand, and reading day by day. Reading it, reading it just that day, the day that's actually the date on the calendar for you. What life was like over the last 200 years on that date for these people. There's nothing, I've done that with a whole year, and there's nothing more beguiling than doing that. It's just a wonderful, fascinating read. Then we have a slim novel. This is by Diane Highbridge. I've recommended this thing many times before. This is a much younger man, about a slightly older woman who falls erotically in love with a boy who's pretty much almost able to be her son, almost young enough to be her son. And there's a marked age gap between the two of them. All their friends notice it. They know, of course, how awkward and odd it is. And there's nothing unseemly about it. Instead, it's just that they have a passionate physical relationship and they fall in love with each other. And the author just fearlessly pursues, where would that go? What would that do to the close-knit social world of these characters? I thought it was fantastic. Okay, then we have the Pelican. This is edited by Jonathan Crew. This is the Pelican trade paperback of William Shakespeare's play Henry VIII, which I absolutely love. I absolutely love it. I go back to it all the time. I don't know why I go back to it all the time, because I know it pretty much by heart. But I think it's just wonderful. Okay, we have an odd keepsake book. Not sure that this was ever actually for sale. This is William and His Friends, a group of notable creatures in the Metropolitan Museum of Art from 1936. That is William. He's a beautiful blue hippopotamus from thousands of years ago. An Egyptian hippopotamus. The one thing, this from 1936, the one thing that you can't glean from this is how beautiful William looks. He is bright, bright blue. And this book takes you through all sorts of other animals at the Museum of Art. Very, very interesting stuff. Okay, then we have a little hardcover. Oh my, this is by Paulina Coney Drown. This is Mrs. Bell. A little profile, memoir, very affectionate love letter to an eccentric fixture in the Boston literary community of 100 years ago. Connected, actually, to a figure that I mentioned in yesterday's Battle Book Haul. And Mrs. Bell was connected to the Choate family, you could say. And she was a wonderful, irascible presence, an absolute fixture at the Boston Athenaeum, private lending library at the top of Beacon Hill. A fixture in all the right places, all the right parties, all the right parlors. Everybody liked her. And she was indefatigably literary, but beholden to no one. So literary figures of the day would court her. Wouldn't it be great if Mrs. Bell would write, an essay on something or other, or even a book review? But this book is a bunch of Mrs. Belliana, all sorts of quotes and quips and anecdotes about her. Just wonderful. The type of thing that, you have to have a bookstore like the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston to even get a book like this. And even if you do, not only is the book, Mrs. Bell, gone, but the whole world that she was part of is gone. I was mentioning this yesterday. That whole Boston literary world of the mid and late 19th century is all gone. Any hint of it is gone. And it once ruled the whole of the literary profile of, I would argue, 2 continents. But anyway, this next item is not a book, but rather a knife. Let's get that out of the way so that we're not knocking anything over. Then we have literary essays by Matthew Arnold. Little Everyman's Library volume of the literary essays of Matthew Arnold. Matthew Arnold, a great book critic, one of the great book critics of all time, and certainly one of the princes of my own profession. Okay, then we saw this guy already. This is Augustin Birrell again. This is his collection, Etc., which is just a collection of odds and ends, a collection of ephemeral essays, but also quite a bit of literary stuff. Yes, Boswell, Sir Walter Scott, John Bunyan, George Whitefield, which is his George Whitefield essay was very useful to me when I was reviewing a book about George Whitefield about 10 years ago. There's also one in here. I've got to find it because I know that it's in this book. It's not in the other Augustin Birrell book that we saw. There's an essay that he wrote defining the scope of the critic. Yes, the province of the reviewer determined. That is delightful. Really, I really ought to revisit it and talk about it in a column. That would be a lot of fun. I think I'll put this book aside when we're done so that I remember to do that. Then we have literary and historical essays. I've mentioned many times that literary figures will do this sort of work because it pays. It doesn't pay much. It's never paid much, but it'll pay more than the paltry little dividends on your slim volume of poetry, or maybe you put out a study of the novels of George Meredith that has sold 10 copies. You're not going to get a big check from your publisher for that. So if somebody down on Fleet Street wants a review of the latest such and such, or an essay on the latest anniversary of so and so, and they come to you and they say, well, it's £20. I'll give you £20 for it, and I'll write you the check right now, or I'll hand you the money. I'll hand you the cash, and maybe if I'm generous, I'll let you keep the book. You're going to take that work, and no matter how successful you become later in your career, you're never going to forget that you were poor, and you're never going to forget how wonderful that felt. You're going to keep doing that work. Right to the end, you're going to keep doing that work. Gore Vidal was submitting book reviews when he was a multimillionaire, and also non-compos mentis. The New York Review of Books would get pieces of his and have no idea what to do with them. You never lose that instinct, and this person didn't either. This person is much better known for something else. The spine is really not helpful. Let's see if we can find the front, any kind of front. No, you're not giving me any kind of front. Okay, well, we'll do it with the spine then. This is Thomas de Quincey. Only instead of Confessions of an English Opium Eater, this is his literary essays of his. These don't, I love these books, but they don't belong here. I have a whole section for these sorts of things. But he has things in here on Shelley, Lamb, one odd long essay on Joan of Arc, a very good piece on Charlemagne that again helped me with a review of a big Charlemagne book that came out a few years ago. It's great to see these things, but that's like 3 in a row that don't belong in here. But that's the whole purpose of a library tour, for me anyway, is to rearrange these things. Okay, then we have a very lovely trade paperback reprint of Kim Newman's Anno Dracula, novel that I've praised on this channel many, many times. Just utterly delightful Victorian fiction pastiche. Almost every fantastical fictional Victorian creature or creation of any kind is in this book, or is name checked in this book, foremost of which being Dracula. I mean, there are plenty of new characters as well. There are plenty of invented characters, but here you get the origins of James Bond, you get Alan Quatermain, you get Lord Greystoke, Tarzan of the Apes, you get a mention of Sherlock Holmes, and a bunch of other people, some obscure and some not. A masterfully done thing, and so enjoyable to read. And as I've described this book many times on this channel, this is the basic conceit of this book is that Bram Stoker's Dracula is a work of fiction. Not because Bram Stoker made it up, but because the author, Bram Stoker, intentionally fictionalized the events of Dracula coming to England. When in reality, in this book's reality, Dracula succeeds. He comes to England, he populates England with the undead, he rises to the very pinnacle of the power structure. The Mina Harker character in this book is not Mina Harker. It's another Victorian female character that you may know. You may recognize her name. And Newman plunks you down in that alternate fictional reality. The conceit being that Bram Stoker wrote a novel about what if Dracula had failed? What if Van Helsing and company had managed to thwart him? When in reality, we all know they didn't. I just thought it was fantastic, just wonderful. And all of its sequels are great. There are many, many sequels. I think the strongest of them is probably Bloody Red Baron. But the third book in the series, Dracula Cha-Cha-Cha, is also amazing. It's funnier than the others, but it's amazingly good. They all have great big set pieces, none better than in Bloody Red Baron, and they also have all fantastic endings, which I think is endemic of novels that were germinated from polished short stories, which this one was, and which, you name it, and almost any good example you can come up with was born as a short story. I think that's endemic because the short story has such structure to it. It has to. It can't be baggy. But I love it. I cannot praise Anna Dracula. I was so happy that Titan Books came out with this whole set of lovely reprints. Then we have a Penguin Classic, which for obvious reasons this should not be here. But I guess it's an Orange Spine Penguin Classic. Maybe that's why I relegated it. This is Aubrey's Brief Lives. Wonderful, wonderful Penguin Classic. I've mentioned that sometimes Penguin Classics just dutifully reprint the target audience, slap an introduction on it, and that's that. And that others are more special. This is incredibly special. The editor here is Oliver Lawson Dick, and he writes a huge introduction. Let me show you. That is the introduction to this book. It's 100 pages long. And in it, he painstakingly uses Aubrey's own writings to reconstruct Aubrey's own life. So really, semi-ironically, Aubrey's life is the first life in this edition of Aubrey's Brief Lives. And it's not brief. It's long. It's 10 times as long as anything else in the book. Utterly fascinating. A rare example where the introduction to a Penguin Classic is almost as worthwhile, maybe a little bit more so, than the contents. I mean, I've read. I included a bookmark that is a Doonesbury cartoon. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Doonesbury. This must be from the 1980s, from the Gulf War, with George H.W. Bush as president, where the troops are all assembled. They're told, here he is. You have thumpa, thumpa, thumpa. That's the presidential helicopter landing. Man, look at that. He travels with 3 choppers. Well, he's running the whole show. I wonder what the old man's going to harangue us about today. And then somebody in the background says, hold your fire, men. And the answer is morale, I'm guessing. Yes, you had to be there. Okay, this next one is a hardcover. Needs a protective dust jacket. It certainly does. I should clean this up completely and put a protective dust jacket on it. Oh, I haven't done that so far. It's got schmutz on the cover as well. But this is another book that I have recommended on this channel many times. This is William Service's book, Owl. Slim little thing about him adopting a little owl. It's got illustrations all throughout. I put an owl bookmark in there. Let me see if I can find. Yes, it's got pencil illustrations all throughout, and it is it's remarkably good. It's unsentimental. It anthropomorphizes Owl. Service admits that he's doing it, but in a restrained kind of way, a believable kind of way, mostly an observational kind of way. There are many books on people adopting owls, adopting birds of any kind, and this is my favorite. I really should, now, since I know that I have a nice pretty hardcover, and since you never know if you're ever going to find another one, I have a couple of copies of this, but this is the one that I have as a nice hardcover. I should really protect this thing. Well, that's another reason why you do a library tour, right? For little mental notes like that. Then we have, okay, this is The Lion in Winter by James Goldman. And this is the story of King Henry II of England and his wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and their three, at the time, sons, Richard, Geoffrey, and John. And one tumultuous, horrible, gut-wrenching, back-knifing Christmas that they have. And for some reason, the publisher, who is this, Random House, gave it this cover. Which as soon as I saw this came out in, I think, the early 2000s. When was this edition? 2004. As soon as I saw this, I thought, well, that has to be the copy of this that I have, because that is just a ridiculous cover. It makes no sense at all. There is no combination of characters in this book that fits that cover. None whatsoever. So I literally don't know why they gave it this cover. When, a man's hand holding the hilt of a sword would have been better. You could have done that really nicely, grainy, nice rocky background. Anything, really. A woman's hand touching an old gilt crown. But instead, two pretty people on the cover of The Lion in Winter. That I do not understand at all. There are charged sexual relations in the play, but none of them look like that. Oh, okay, great. Then we have a barrage of P.G. Wodehouse, all in these Penguin omnibus editions, these Penguin trade paperbacks. This is an omnibus of Imperial Blandings. There is the Empress of Blandings herself, the great prize pig of Castle Blandings. Then we have Life at Blandings with a kind of a very different style, an Art Deco cover. Then we have Life with Jeeves, also with an Art Deco cover. These are just anthologies of either short novels or tons of short stories. And then Vintage Jeeves. So for P.G. Wodehouse anthologies, there is a great deal of P.G. Wodehouse in this room. But that's great. I love these little anthologies, and I reinforce them to help them hold up. Penguin trade paperbacks usually don't need a whole lot of help. They're usually pretty good with holding up. And then finally, the last one is a hardcover. This is the Michael Nyland translation of Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Very stark, minimal, militaristic cover there. This is from the great folks at W.W. Norton. And it has blurbs on the back from a professor of Chinese literature, also from Dennis Washburn, the translator of The Tale of Genji, and me. Yours truly is also on that. A rare instance where I'm actually advanced blurbed on the dust jacket of a hardcover. That doesn't always happen. I'm always very, very pleased when it does. There's something extra special about being advanced blurbed on the dust jacket of a hardcover. I don't know what it is. I don't know quite how to explain it, but it's definitely real. It's probably the book buyer in me, really. That you're getting to the reader with your opinion. Far more readers are never going to read your review. You're getting to the reader with your opinions long before the paperback. That's kind of neat. So there you go. That's this shelf. As we will continue on with this library tour, one 20-minute video at a time. So I will see you hopefully tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.